Marcus Cole stood at the window of the alien ship and looked at the stars. 3 years ago, he never imagined he would be here. He was just a soldier from Earth, a planet that most aliens considered young and unimportant. But fate had other plans for him. The Valanthi Empire had requested a human military advisor. They were fighting a war at their borders, and they had heard stories about human tactics. Stories about how humans won battles they should have lost. How they fought was something the Valanthi could not understand. Marcus was chosen for this mission. He was 32 years old, experienced in combat, and known for his calm mind under pressure. The military leaders told him this was an honor. He would be the first human to ever serve aboard a Valanthi flagship. What they did not tell him was how lonely it would be. The Valanthi were tall beings with silver skin and eyes that glowed like pale moons. They were beautiful in a cold way, like statues made of ice. They had lived for thousands of years as a species, and they had decided long ago that emotions were dangerous. They bred feelings out of their bloodline through careful genetic selection. Love, anger, fear. Joythes were considered diseases of lesser species. They looked at Marcus the way a scientist looks at an interesting insect. Curious, but distant. For the first year, Marcus did his job and kept to himself. He taught them about human battle strategies. He explained why humans sometimes made choices that seemed foolish but worked anyway. The Valanthi listened and took notes. But they never really understood. Then he met Princess Liren. She was the youngest daughter of the Emperor. 200 years old, but still considered young by her people. She had been sent to the flagship to learn about military command. The first time Marcus saw her, she was standing in the observation deck. Watching a nebula paint colors across the darkness of space, she turned and looked at him with those silver eyes. And Marcus felt something shift inside his chest. Over the following months, Liren began to seek him out. At first, she said it was for research. She wanted to understand humans better. She asked him questions that no other Valanthi had ever asked. Why did humans create music? What was the purpose of crying? Why did human soldiers write letters to their families before battle, when logic said they should focus on survival? Marcus answered her questions honestly. He told her about love and loss. He told her about his mother back on Earth, how she used to sing to him when he was scared. He told her about friends who died in combat, and how he still talked to them sometimes in his dreams. Liren listened with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. She was not studying him like the others did. She was trying to feel what he felt. One night she came to his quarters. Her silver skin seemed paler than usual. Her hands were shaking something he had never seen in any Valanthi before. She told him that something was wrong with her. She said she could not stop thinking about him. When he was not near her, she felt empty. When he smiled, she felt warmth spreading through her chest. These feelings were not supposed to exist inside her. They had been removed from her genetic code thousands of years before she was born. But somehow, they were there, growing, becoming stronger every day. Marcus knew he should push her away. He knew the rules of the Valanthi Empire. A princess could not bond with an outsider. The punishment was death. Not just for her, but her entire bloodline would be shamed. An Earth-young, vulnerable Earth would face the anger of an empire that had never lost a war. But when she looked at him with those eyes full of confusion and hope, he could not lie. Not completely. He spent the next 6 months in the most painful happiness of his life. They met in secret. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. He taught her human expressions, and she actually laughed for the first time in her existence. The sound was awkward and unpracticed, but to Marcus, it was the most beautiful thing he had ever heard. He was falling in love with her, and she was falling in love with him. Then Marcus discovered the truth. He found a classified document during a routine security check. It was an order from the Valanthi High Council. They had been watching Liren for months. They knew about her contamination, as they called it. They were planning to execute her quietly once the border wars ended. Marcus felt his world collapse. He had 2 choices. He could tell Liren the truth and let her fight for their love. But he knew she would refuse to hide. She would stand before her people and declare her feelings, and they would kill her for it. Or he could save her life by breaking her heart. He chose to break her heart. The next time they met, Marcus was cold. He told her that humans were not capable of forming real attachments with other species. He said that everything he had shown her was just cultural behavior, like a dance with no meaning behind it. He told her that he felt nothing for her. Liren stood perfectly still as he spoke. Her face showed no expression. She was Valanthe. After all but Marcus saw something shatter behind her silver eyes. She asked him one question. She asked if he was telling her the truth. Marcus looked at the woman he loved more than anything in the galaxy. He thought about her laugh, her curiosity, the way she tilted her head when she was trying to understand something new. He thought about how she would look standing before an execution squad. He said yes. He was telling the truth. The next morning, Marcus requested an immediate discharge from his position. The Valanthe commanders were confused, but granted his request. Within a week, he was on a transport ship heading back to Earth. He did not look back at the flagship as it disappeared into the stars. He could not. Marcus returned to Earth and tried to forget. He moved to a small town on the coast where nobody knew his name. He found work as a mechanic, fixing boats and engines, doing simple things with his hands that did not require him to think. He grew older. He grew quieter. He never talked about his time among the stars, but every night, he dreamed of silver eyes and a laugh that sounded like it was discovering joy for the first time. 3 years passed. Then one evening, as Marcus was walking home from the docks, he heard people screaming. Not in fear and amazement. He looked up and saw something that made his heart stop. A Valenthea royal cruiser was descending through the clouds. It was heading toward the public beach, moving slowly, making no aggressive moves. Just landing gentle as a falling leaf. Marcus stood frozen as the ship touched down on the sand. The whole town had gathered now, pointing and shouting. News drones appeared from nowhere, broadcasting to the entire world. The ship's doors opened. Princess Liren stepped out alone. She wore no armor. She carried no weapons. She had no guards behind her on, act so shocking that every alien species watching would talk about it for centuries. She looked older. There were lines on her silver face that had not been there before. But her eyes were the same. Those pale, glowing eyes that had looked at Marcus like he held the answers to questions. She did not know how to ask. She spoke into a translation drone, and her voice echoed across the beach. Marcus Cole, I am here. Marcus felt his carefully built walls begin to crack. 3 years of lies, 3 years of hiding, 3 years of pretending he felt nothing, all of it crumbling like sand before a wave. She had come for him, and he knew, in that moment, that nothing would ever be the same again. The world went crazy. Every news channel on Earth showed the same image. An alien princess standing on a beach, waiting. She did not move. She did not speak to the reporters who gathered around her. She did not acknowledge the military vehicles that formed a cautious circle at the edge of the sand. She only waited for Marcus. Cole. Government officials tried to approach her. She looked through them like they were made of glass. Diplomats from 6 different countries came with translators and gifts. She did not even turn her head. The President of the United States sent a personal message. Liren let the drone read it and then continued staring at the horizon. One reporter asked her what she wanted. She gave the same answer she had given when she landed. Marcus Cole, I am here. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky and began to set. Still, Liren stood on that beach. When rain started to fall, she did not seek shelter. Water ran down her silver skin and dripped from her hair, but she remained perfectly still, like a statue built to outlast time itself. 16 hours. That is how long she stood there without food, without rest, without protection from the weather. Marcus watched it all from his small apartment. His hands were shaking. His friends from town had come to check on him, asking who he was, what his connection to this alien princess could possibly be. He could not answer them. The government found him, of course. Men in dark suits arrived and strongly suggested that he cooperate. They said the entire planet was watching. They said he had a responsibility. Marcus knew they were right, but he also knew that the moment he saw Liren, every lie he had told would fall apart. he went anyway. When his car arrived at the beach, the crowd parted like water. Cameras pointed at him from every direction. Drones flew overhead, broadcasting his face to billions of people. Marcus barely noticed any of it. His eyes were locked on the silver figure standing at the edge of the sea. Liren saw him. For the first time in 16 hours, she moved. She walked toward him slowly, her steps careful on the wet sand. Marcus walked toward her too, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might break through his chest. They stopped 3 feet apart. The whole world held its breath. Liren studied his face. She looked at the lines around his eyes, the gray that had appeared in his hair, the weight that seemed to press down on his shoulders. "You have aged," she said. Her voice was the same, calm, measured, controlled, but there was something underneath it now. Something that had not been there before. "It happens to humans," Marcus replied. His voice came out rough. He had not spoken much in 3 years. "I know." Liren tilted her head in that way she used to, the way that meant she was processing information. "I've spent 3 years studying your species. I read your literature. I listened to your music. I examined your historical records." Marcus felt cold despite the warm rain falling around them. "Why?" he asked. "Because you lied to me?"
Ow.
The words hit him like a physical blow. He took a step back. "You told me that humans cannot form attachments with other species," Liren continued. Her silver eyes never left his face. "You said your kindness was cultural programming. You said you felt nothing, Liren. I did not believe you." Her voice cracked slightly, an impossible sound from a Velanthi. "I could not believe you. So I searched for evidence. I read letters written by human soldiers to lovers they would never see again. I watched recordings of humans crying at funerals for pets, for friends, for strangers. I studied your art paintings and songs and stories created for no logical purpose except to express feeling." She took a step closer to him. "Humans do not just bond. Marcus Cole. You bond so deeply that it destroys you. You love so completely that you die for it. You feel so strongly that you create entire worlds from nothing but imagination and emotion." Marcus could not speak. His throat was tight and his eyes were burning. "So I ask you again," Liren said. Her voice was shaking now, and her hands, those steady, perfect hands, were trembling at her sides. "Why did you leave me?" The cameras captured everything. Billions of people watched as Marcus Cole, a simple mechanic from a coastal town, broke down in front of an alien princess. He told her the truth. He told her about the document he found, about the execution order, about the war that would have started if she had declared her love for him. He told her that he lied because he loved her, and he could not watch her die for him. "I thought if you believed I felt nothing, you would move on," he said. Tears were running down his face, mixing with the rain. "I thought you would forget about me and go back to being a princess. I thought you would be safe." Liren was silent for a long moment. She processed his words the way her people processed everything carefully, analytically. Without visible emotion, then she did something that no Velanathi had done in recorded history. She reached out and touched his face. Her fingers were cool against his skin, gentle in a way that seemed impossible for her kind. "You carried this pain alone," she said softly. "For 3 years, you suffered in silence to protect me. This is what humans call love, yes?" "Yes," Marcus whispered. "Then I must tell you something, Marcus Cole." "Why?" Her silver eyes met his, and he saw something glowing inside them, something warm and terrified and beautiful all at once. "I believe I have contracted your condition." Marcus stared at her. "My people would call it contamination," Liren continued. "They would say I have been infected by human weakness. But I do not feel weak. I feel more alive than I have ever felt in 200 years of existence." She smiled. It was an awkward expression on her face, unpracticed and strange. But to Marcus, it was perfect. "I came here because I could not stay away," she said. "I thought I wanted answers. I thought I wanted to understand why you left. But the truth is simpler than that. I came because you were here, and being away from you felt like missing a part of myself that I did not know existed until you showed it to me." Marcus felt something break open inside his chest. Not painful relieving. Like a wound that had finally been allowed to heal. You learned to love, he said, as Liren nodded. I do not know if my people can ever forgive me for it. I do not know if there is a place for me in the galaxy anymore. But I know that I would rather feel this pain than feel nothing at all. She took his hand. Her fingers intertwined with his, silver against brown, alien against human. I am not leaving again, she said. Whatever comes next, I want to face it here. With you? Marcus looked at the woman who had crossed galaxies to find him. He looked at the cameras recording their every word. He looked at the sky, where somewhere far above, an empire was probably already preparing its response. None of it mattered, okay, he said. His voice was steady now, stronger than it had been in years. Together, then, Liren squeezed his hand. Together. The rain continued to fall around them, but neither of them noticed. They stood on that beach holding hands while the whole world watched. Two people from different stars choosing each other, despite everything that said they should not. It was beautiful, it was dangerous, and it was only the beginning. News of the beach reunion spread across the galaxy in hours. Communication networks that connected thousands of worlds carried the story of Princess Liren and her human. Diplomats discussed it in hushed voices. Scientists analyzed her behavior for signs of mental illness. Religious leaders called it an abomination, but it was the Volanthi High Council that responded first. 3 days after Liren's arrival on Earth, a message was broadcast on every channel the Empire controlled. The Emperor himself appeared on screen, a being so ancient that even his own people did not know his true age. His silver skin was almost white with time, and his eyes glowed like dying stars. He spoke calmly, without anger or sadness. The Volanthi did not allow themselves such things. Princess Liren, he announced, had been genetically compromised. Her emotional contamination was a danger to the purity of the bloodline. Effective immediately, she was stripped of her title, removed from the line of succession, and declared dead to her family. The message ended with a single image, Liren's name being erased from the imperial records. As if she had never existed at all, Liren watched the broadcast sitting on Marcus's small couch, a cup of tea growing cold in her hands. She had never learned to drink tea before, but Marcus's mother had insisted she try it. They have made their choice, Liren said, when the screen went dark. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. I am no longer Volanthi. Marcus sat beside her, close, but not touching. He knew she needed space to process. That was something he had learned during their time on the flagship. The Volanthi needed silence to think. How do you feel? He asked finally. Liren considered the question. She turned it over in her mind like a strange object she had never seen before. I feel free, she said slowly, and terrified, and sad, and angry. She looked at him with wonder in her silver eyes. Is it always like this? Feeling so many things at once? Marcus smiled. Welcome to being human. Granted, Liren asylum the next day. The vote was unanimous in the United Nations. For the first time in history, an alien had been given the right to live among humans as one of their own, and Liren embraced it completely. She moved into Marcus's small house by the sea. She learned to cook badly at first, burning pasta and oversalting soup, but she refused to give up. She watched human films and cried at the sad parts, then laughed at herself for crying. She made friends with Marcus's neighbors, elderly humans who taught her card games and gossiped about local scandals. She was discovering what it meant to feel, and every day brought something new. One evening, she and Marcus walked along the beach where she had landed. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of orange and pink. I understand now, Liren said, watching the colors change. Why humans make art. Why you write poetry and compose music and build beautiful things that serve no practical purpose. Why? Marcus asked. Because existence without feeling is just existing. She turned to face him. My people live for thousands of years. We build empires and conquer planets and accumulate knowledge that fills libraries the size of worlds. but we do not know why. We continue because continuing is what we have always done.
Ow.
She took his hand. Humans live such short lives, she continued. Barely a century if you are fortunate. But in that time, you laugh and cry and love and create. You fill your brief existence with meaning. You burn so brightly that even when you are gone, the light remains. Marcus squeezed her fingers. That might be the most human thing you've ever said. Liren smiled, a real smile now, one she had practiced until it felt natural. I had a good teacher, but their peace could not last. 1 month after Lorraine's disownment, a new message arrived from the Volanthi Empire. This one was not a broadcast. It was a formal diplomatic communication. It's delivered to Earth's government. The message was simple. Return the princess for treatment and reconditioning, or face consequences. Earth's leaders were afraid. The Volanthi Empire controlled more than 2,000 star systems. Their military had never been defeated. Their technology was centuries ahead of anything humanity possessed. Marcus was called to speak before the United Nations. They wanted his assessment. They wanted to know if there was any way to reason with the Volanthi, any compromise that could prevent disaster. He stood in that great hall, surrounded by representatives from every nation on Earth. And he thought about what to say. He thought about Liren learning to laugh. He thought about her crying during sad movies and dancing badly to music she was just learning to love. He thought about the way she looked at the ocean like it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Then he thought about what would happen if they sent her back. The reconditioning, the erasure of everything she had become, the death of the person she had chosen to be. Marcus looked at the assembled leaders of Earth and spoke. You want to know what makes humans different from other species in the galaxy? He said, we don't just survive. We choose what is worth dying for. The hall was silent. Liren chose to feel. She chose to love. She looked at everything her people told her was weakness, and she decided it was strength. She crossed a galaxy alone, without weapons or protection, because her heart told her to. He paused, letting the words sink in. Now, you were asking me if we should send her back to people who consider love a disease? People who would cut out the best part of her and call it healing. Marcus shook his head. I am just a mechanic from a small town. I do not have the right to make decisions for a whole planet. But I will tell you this. If humanity hands over someone who came to us for protection, someone who trusted us to be better than the empire she fled, then we do not deserve to call ourselves human. He looked around the room at the faces watching him, some afraid, some inspired, some calculating the cost of what he was suggesting. The Volanthi are powerful. They might destroy us for this. But there are some things worth fighting for, even if you lose. There are some choices that define who you are, regardless of the outcome. Marcus straightened his shoulders. Liren chose to feel. Now we have to choose to. What kind of species do we want to be? The vote took 3 hours. There were arguments and debates and moments when it seemed like fear would win, but in the end, Earth voted unanimously to reject the Volanthi ultimatum. The message sent back to the Empire was simple. Liren stays. She is one of us now. When Marcus returned home and told Liren what had happened, she stared at him for a long moment. Then she started to cry, not from sadness, but from something else. Something she was still learning to name. Your people chose me, she whispered. They do not even know me, and they chose me. That is what humans do, Marcus said, pulling her into his arms. We protect our own, and you are one of us now. Inside, the stars were shining. Somewhere among them, a vast empire was preparing for war. But in that small house by the sea, 2 people held each other and refused to be afraid. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The Volanthi Armada arrived 3 months after. Earth rejected their ultimatum. 10,000 warships emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. They formed a wall of metal and light that blocked out the stars. Each ship was larger than anything humanity had ever built, armed with weapons that could reduce cities to ash in seconds. Earth had 400 ships, old vessels, most of them, converted cargo haulers and aging military cruisers held together by determination and duct tape. Looking at the numbers, Any logical mind would see only one possible outcome. The Volanthi saw only one possible outcome, too. This would be a quick execution. A lesson to the galaxy about what happened when lesser species defied the Empire. They did not understand humans, Commander. Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the SS Defiance, watching the enemy fleet on her screens. Around her, officers worked at their stations with focused intensity. Nobody was panicking. Nobody was running. They outnumber us 25-1, her tactical officer reported. Chen smiled grimly. Good. That makes targeting easier. The human fleet did not arrange itself in neat formations like a proper military force. Instead, they scattered like leaves in a wind, each ship moving independently, unpredictably. The Volanthi computers tried to calculate their patterns and failed. There were no patterns. Just chaos. The first engagement was a disaster for the Volanthi. Human pilots flew in ways that made no logical sense. They used asteroids for cover and slingshot around planets for speed. They taunted their enemies over open communication channels, sending jokes and insults, and sometimes just playing loud music. They named their missiles after loved ones and wrote messages on the hulls of their ships. One pilot, moments before ramming his damaged vessel into a Volanthi cruiser, broadcast a single sentence: "Tell my wife I loved her." The explosion took out 2 enemy ships. The Volanthi commanders were confused. Their tactics assumed opponents who wanted to survive. But these humans fought like survival was secondary to something else. Something the Volanthi could not calculate. Still, the numbers were overwhelming. Earth's fleet was being destroyed, ship by ship. For every Volanthi vessel they brought down, they lost 3 of their own, but they were buying time. On Earth, Lorin was working. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment, using her knowledge of Volanthi's systems to create something that had never existed before. Not a weapon. Something far more dangerous. She broadcast a message to the entire Volanthi fleet. "My name is Liren," she said. Her voice carried through space, reaching every ship, every soldier, every commander in the Armada. "You have been told I am contaminated, broken, diseased." In the fleet, soldiers paused at their stations. Some had known her personally. Others had only heard stories. All of them listened. "I am here to tell you what contamination really feels like," she began to share. She played human music, a symphony by Beethoven, composed by a man who could not hear. She played recordings of human laughter, the sound of children playing, the quiet joy of friends reuniting after years apart. She read letters, love letters from soldiers who knew they might die, wedding vows from couples who had nothing but hope, goodbye messages from parents to children, full of fierce, protective love. She showed them human art, paintings created for no logical reason except to express what words could not, sculptures made by hands that knew their work would outlive them, songs written in dark times to remind people that light still existed. For 5 hours, she poured human emotion into the cold hearts of the Volanthi fleet. And something began to change in the Imperial cruiser Eternal Vigilance. A young soldier named Kethron watched a recording of a human funeral. He saw people weeping, holding each other, sharing their grief openly. He had never seen anything like it. "They mourn their dead," he whispered to himself. "They carry the memory of those they lost." When his people died, they were simply replaced. Their names were removed from records. Their existence was erased as efficiently as deleting a file. No mourning, no memory, no meaning. Kethron found himself wondering what it would feel like to matter that much to someone. He was not the only one across the fleet. Volanthi soldiers were experiencing something their genetics had tried to eliminate: doubt, curiosity, the first stirrings of feeling. Some were disturbed and shut off the broadcast, but others kept listening. They heard the princess, their princess, no matter what the council said, describing what it felt like to laugh, to cry, to love someone so much that you would cross a galaxy just to see them again. They heard her say that emotion was not weakness. It was fuel, purpose, meaning it was the reason humans burned so brightly despite their short lives, and some of them believed her. 17 ships stopped firing. Their commanders opened communication channels with Earth and requested permission to withdraw. They did not want to fight anymore. They wanted to understand. Then 50 more ships followed. Then 300. The Volanthe. High Council watched in horror as their perfect fleet began to fracture. Soldiers who had been bred for obedience were asking questions. Warriors who had never felt doubt were refusing orders, all because one princess had shown them what they were missing. The fleet admiral demanded an immediate assault on Earth, but his own officers hesitated. One of them, a veteran of 100 campaigns, looked at the human fleet still, fighting desperately against impossible odds, and said something no Volanthe had ever said before. "Why are we doing this?" The admiral had no answer. The Volanthe had conquered and expanded for millennia. It's not because they wanted anything, but because conquest was what they had always done. There was no purpose behind it. No reason. Just endless, meaningless continuation. The human fleet was dying, but they were dying for something. For love, for protection. For the right of one woman to feel. For the first time in recorded history, the Volanthe Empire called for a ceasefire. The human ships stopped firing. The Volanthe ships held their positions. In the silence between stars, two species faced each other and wondered what came next. On Earth, Marcus received the news. The battle was over. Not won exactly, but not lost either. He found Liren sitting on the beach, staring at the sky. She looked exhausted. The broadcast had taken everything from her. "They stopped," he said, sitting beside her. "I know." Her voice was hoarse from speaking for so long. "You did that. You reached them." Liren shook her head slowly. "I just showed them a door. Some of them chose to open it. Some of them will close it again and pretend they saw nothing. But the door exists now. It will always exist." She leaned against him, and he put his arm around her. "Your people fought impossibly hard," she said. "They knew they could not win, and they fought anyway. That is what we do. I know." She closed her eyes. "I think I finally understand why." Above them, the stars were still at war. The galaxy was watching. Nothing was certain. But humanity had done what it always did. They had faced impossible odds and refused to surrender. They had fought not because they could win, but because some things were worth fighting for. And in the darkness between worlds, seeds of change had been planted. The universe would never be the same. The Treaty of Soul was signed 6 months after the ceasefire. It was not a surrender. Neither side had truly won or lost. Instead, it was something new, an agreement between two species that had looked at each other across a battlefield and decided there might be another way. The Volanthe Empire withdrew its remaining fleet. In exchange, Earth agreed to share its culture openly with any who wished to learn. No weapons. No territory. Just the free exchange of music, art, literature, all the other things that made humans who they were. The High Council approved the treaty through gritted teeth. They had no choice. Too many of their own people had begun asking questions that had no logical answers. The contamination Liren had spread was invisible but unstoppable. Across the Empire, changes began to appear. In a military academy on the planet Vethrox, a young cadet started keeping a journal. She wrote about her days, her thoughts, her small hopes and fears. When her superiors found it, they did not know how to respond. There was no rule against such things. There had never needed to be. On the trading hub of Celestris Prime, a merchant began collecting human paintings. He could not explain why he bought them. He only knew that when he looked at them, something stirred inside his chest that he had never felt before. In the capital city itself, hidden gatherings began to form. Volanthe met in secret to share human music and discuss what it meant. They called themselves the Awakened, and their numbers grew every day. Some called it corruption. Others called it evolution. Liren watched it all from Earth. She had become an ambassador not of politics, but of possibility. Ships arrived from across the galaxy, carrying beings who wanted to understand what had happened. How had one human changed a princess so completely? How had that princess changed an empire? Liren answered their questions honestly. She told them about Marcus, about his kindness, and his laughter, and his tears. She told them about learning to feel, about the terror and joy of emotions she had never been designed to experience. She told them that the journey was painful, but worth it. Your species achieved greatness through logic and control, she would say, but you lost something along the way. Something that cannot be measured or calculated. Something that makes existence more than just survival. Many did not understand. They left confused and disturbed, but some understood. They looked at Liren with her imperfect smile and her eyes that could not hide what she felt. They saw something worth having. The emotional alliance, as the media called. It began with 12 species. Within a year, there were 40. Within 5 years, over 100, they did not form an army or a government. They simply agreed to share what humans called culture. Music was exchanged between worlds. Art was created collaboratively by beings who had never met in person. Stories were told that spanned galaxies, written by authors from dozens of different species. And slowly, the cold emptiness between the stars began to warm. On the 5th anniversary of Lorraine's arrival on Earth, she and Marcus returned to the beach where everything had begun. The sand was the same. The water still reflected the sky in rippling patterns of blue and gold. But the sky itself had changed. Where once there had been only stars, now there were ships. Dozens of them, hanging in orbit like lanterns in the darkness. Human ships and Velanthi ships flying side by side. Vessels from species that had never spoken to each other before the alliance formed. They were there for the celebration. For the day of first feeling, as it had come to be called. The anniversary of the moment when one princess stepped off her ship and asked a simple question that changed everything. Marcus stood beside Liren and watched the lights move across the heavens. "Are you happy?" he asked. It was a question he had asked her many times over the years. Her answer was always different, because happiness was not a fixed point for her. It was a journey, a process, a skill she was still learning. "I am content," she said after a moment, "and grateful, and sometimes overwhelmed by how much I feel." She turned to look at him. "Is that happiness?" Marcus smiled. After 5 years together, her questions still surprised him sometimes. "I think happiness is different for everyone," he said. "But what you described sounds like a pretty good version of it." Liren nodded slowly. She had learned to accept imprecise answers. Human emotions did not fit into neat categories, and neither did hers. "Do you have regrets?" she asked. Marcus thought about the question. He thought about the 3 years he had spent alone, believing he would never see her again. He thought about the war, about the people who had died fighting for her right to feel. He thought about the hard days and the painful conversations, and all the moments when it would have been easier to give up. "No," he said finally. "Every choice led to this moment, and this moment is worth everything that came before." Liren took his hand. Her fingers were still cool against his skin, but he had learned to love that sensation. It was part of who she was. "I have something to tell you," she said. Her voice was careful, measured in the old Velanthi way, but underneath it, he could hear something else. Excitement, nervousness, hope, all mixed together. "What is it?" She pulled a small device from her pocket. It looked like a translator, but different. Lights pulsed inside it in patterns he did not recognize. "The Velanthi lived for thousands of years," she said. "I always assumed you would age and die while I remained the same. I prepared myself for that grief." Marcus nodded. They had discussed this before. It was the shadow over their relationship, the one truth that could not be changed. "But I have been working with human scientists," Liren continued, "and Velanthi medical researchers who defected to the Alliance. Together, we have created something new." She handed him the device. "It will not make you immortal," she said. "Nothing can do that. But it will slow your aging significantly." "Centuries, Marcus. We could have centuries together." Marcus stared at the device in his hands. He thought about watching Liren learn and grow and change over decades that he had never expected to see. He thought about all the sunsets and all the laughter and all the quiet moments they could share. His eyes filled with tears. Human tears. The kind that Liren had learned to recognize as joy. "Why didn't you tell me you were working on this?" "Because I was afraid it would not work." She smiled that practiced, imperfect smile that he loved more than any other expression in the universe. And because I wanted to surprise you. Humans like surprises. Yes. Marcus laughed. It was a wet, emotional sound that made Lorraine's heart flutter in ways her genetics had never prepared her for. Yes, he said. Humans like surprises. He pulled her into his arms and held her close. Above them, the ships of 100 species painted light across the darkness. Around them, the waves continued their endless rhythm against the shore. Thank you, he whispered into her hair. For coming back, for fighting, for everything. Liren closed her eyes and let herself feel joy, love, gratitude, peace. All the emotions she had been taught were weaknesses, burning inside her like stars. Thank you for showing me how to live, she replied. They stood together on that beach as the galaxy celebrated around them. Two people from different worlds who had chosen each other against all odds. Proof that love was not logical, not efficient, not practical. And not practically. That was exactly why it mattered. The universe was vast and cold, full of species who had forgotten how to feel. But it was changing. One heart at a time. It was waking up. And it had all begun with a princess who crossed the stars to ask a simple question. Human, why did you leave me? The answer, as it turned out, was worth everything.